Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another fantastic edition of Sitback with Shaq and Anu, where we have some fantastic guests coming on the show Monday to Thursday, live on our Podhub platforms, and of course, live on Channel 1 on Dialogue TV. And as you can see, we have another great show lined up, of course, and talking about something that is so very dear to each and every one of us, Anu.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we have, I think, the two ideal gentlemen to talk about the subject.
Right.
And very, very important, given the current context of, where Sri Lanka stands. And we're just talking about this off air, going through a political crisis and a financial crisis, which has compounded the political crisis, I feel. And, one of the very few industries that's still bringing in foreign exchange into the country, which is very, very important for our survival. And our possible way out of this mess lies in this industry, and of course I'm talking about the IT industry here.
So we have Peter De Almeida on the show with us. Peter, nice to see you after a long time.
You too, Shah.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
And we also have Sanjeeva Veeravarna, of course, the CEO of WSO2 and founder. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you.
Hi,
and it's going to be a lot of fun, of course, discussing details with two stalwarts in the industry.
Absolutely.
They know their numbers inside out.
Yes, I was
Well,
listening.
we won't find out.
We will. We obviously, I mean, this is before we actually get into what we have a daily poll. Before we get into that, something that I think Sanjeeva mentioned is the fact that this is IT. It's so boring, but he's in the industry. But listen, it's not it. At the end of the day, it affects each and every one of us.
Absolutely.
At
But,
some way or the other.
Yeah, regular people, like the people who work in a bank or, in the telco industry or whatever, or just people who are right now lined up at about 1,200 petrol sheds around the country.
Yeah.
For them, it's a little Greek.
Yeah, but there's some sort of IT involved in each and every one of us.
Every day.
Every day.
We are come into contact with it every day. But in the let's say the macroeconomic context of the thing, it means big bucks and it's a possible way out of the mess.
And we're going to get into all that. We're going to start off with our daily poll, what we have right now on the show. Let's have it on your screen. Let's figure out what you need to do. All right, Anu?
So here we go. I have to say, coming up with this daily poll can be a challenge.
Very difficult.
Yeah. So it has to be relevant to what we're going to discuss and the guests we have. So here it is. It's a yes or no answer, very simple. WhatsApp your answers to our hotline 077 669 1590, and at the end of the show we will reveal things as they stand. Can the ICT industry survive the brain drain in Sri Lanka? Can the ICT industry survive the brain drain in Sri Lanka? And of course, gentlemen, what do you think?
That's a question I think you should ask Sanjeeva, because
Yeah.
he's involved now,
Yeah.
and he runs a large IT company, software, product and services. So Sanjeeva, I think you're the best person to answer this.
Sure. Survive is a strong word. So survive, yes.
Yeah,
Thrive through this, very difficult.
right.
Survive, certainly. We are resilient. We have a lot of scope, and there's always new people coming. We have a massive brain drain. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But how
Is it
we
quite
can?
sizable, sir? Is it significant?
Yeah,
Would say significant.
I think with the mid-tier experienced people,
Right.
which is the critical group that you need in order to mentor and drive
Right,
the more sort of new people in the industry.
right.
That group is highly vulnerable,
Right.
and we can talk more about
Yeah, we're gonna
what
give-
the reasons are and so forth, right? But
Exactly.
yes,
It is what it is. So there you have it from Sanjeev himself. We'll tell you how the people feel at the end of the show. But of course, we must get into usual social
Twitterati
media
stuff.
messages.
We
Let's see.
handpicked some of the stuff that we obviously has been coming up on the Twitter feeds today, and just to find out exactly what type of day we've been actually having. Today was a heavier day than we had yesterday.
Absolutely.
There was zero news day yesterday.
Today there were hugs.
Let's get into those hugs right now. Rightio, let's have our first tweet, and this is something we were talking about. Sri Lanka sued by bondholder in the US following historic default. That is a story that actually came up the first thing in the morning. Hirunika leads protests opposite the Prime Minister's residence was another big story that happened today. And yeah, this is the hug you were talking about.
Absolutely, bosom buddies.
Yeah, I like the caption, the Hirunika's police hug. And she actually did hug a few people.
Oh, like when you take a selfie with the police, you know, like copped over, it's a polfie. And of course, here we have from Newswire, we are now facing a far more serious situation beyond the mere shortages of fuel, gas, electricity and food. Our economy has faced a complete collapse. Sri Lankan Prime Minister outlines next steps in a special parliament address. Of course, you know, so full of hope.
Yeah.
of optimism just like flow. Kanak mirikot optimism khalak.
It's nothing that we haven't heard before.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, every time the address is, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse, and that's where we are. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of the show. We're going to get into, like Anu said, an industry that has been thriving in Sri Lanka for the last several years. Lots of young executives want to get into the ICT industry and the IT industry. Right now, is it fair to say that it's actually hanging by a thread, Peter?
Well, in many ways. Now, Sanjeev has spoken about that side of the business.
Right.
I was not involved in software development of that scale.
Right.
They're a global company. And so you heard from him and he'll give you more details. But I've heard smaller companies
Right.
who are friends of mine, like Harsha, they are losing people, 5, 10. So that's one side. Now, before the show, we were talking about the consumption of IT. Large banks and other companies, conglomerates, and others use a lot of IT.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of money that dollars are needed. They are unable to service contracts, so they are stuck.
Yeah.
So they have to service these, the requirements, the hardware, networking, applications, and all of that. They can't open LCs.
Right.
So it's a double whammy,
Yeah.
So
Well, what we don't seem to,
bad
Peter, what we don't seem to understand is the fact that when you're talking about the IT industry, we're talking about really high tech stuff, and so, but it actually filters down to a common man who needs to use the simple app, which is also a requirement, and it sort of feeds off from the industry at the moment. If the industry cannot actually service that, that app also possibly goes away.
Right.
I mean, there are so many things that we obviously are getting into. But the IT industry also gives employment to a couple of 100,000 individuals in this country. So Sanjeevana, you obviously at WSO2, you have close to about over 1,000 people employed at
About 1,000, yeah. Almost 1,000.
Almost 1,000 people. And when did you see this crisis coming along, and what were the plans that you decided to take, and are you sticking to those plans?
So we are somewhat insulated from the local crisis because we have customers in 90 countries.
Right.
Right. So we do have local customers, and they have their challenges, but we are basically an export. We make products that we sell globally.
Right.
So we have a little bit of sort of a hedge on what happens in Sri Lanka as a result.
Right.
So we knew something was happening. Obviously, everybody knew something was happening, except some few people.
I don't think they still know.
They haven't got the memo yet. They're not on email.
There you go.
So there was clearly something happening, but there was little we could do as a company to do anything about the crisis.
Right.
The only thing we could do was to say, okay, we need to plan ahead and be able to deal with customers who get upset that Sri Lanka is kind of in a crisis situation.
Right.
Because Sri Lanka, in WSO2, Sri Lanka is a critical component of the company. We are a global company headquartered in the US, but 90% of the employees are in Sri Lanka.
Right.
All product innovation, product delivery is from here. A lot of customer success, a lot of sales, a lot of marketing activity happens from here. Finance operations, basically a lot of company operations runs from here. So then customers get concerned saying, are you guys going to be okay? Because
Concerned, are they panicking or concerned?
well, so in the early stages when it first started, there was a little bit of panic.
Yeah.
Some larger customers then want to understand what we're doing about it.
Right, right.
So we did what we had to do at that time, which is we shipped out a bunch of people out of the country,
Right.
basically, and parked them, in Maldives and Dubai.
So you relocated them.
Yeah, we moved about 50 people, 50, 60 people
Right.
out of the country temporarily.
Right.
To kind of say, look, even if things go really bad here, we have people all over the world anyway.
Right.
But we added an additional sort of.
Layout.
So do they, when they say bad, are they concerned about power cuts and things? You won't be able to. What
Yeah,
are they
yeah.
really
I mean,
concerned
no.
about?
Again, the
kind of-
news perception.
Right.
The reality, right?
Right.
The news perception in Europe and Australia and so forth in particular. US doesn't really know because they have a little part going on somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So they don't really know what's going on here, which is
Anyway,
great.
they're in a bubble.
We don't show up on the radar.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah. So when what they see is Sri Lanka's fallen apart, people are hungry, people are killing each other. When even the protests, which were extremely peaceful, as we know
That
very
we've
well,
been part of, yes.
were reported when there was an issue when there was an issue from the other side,
Right.
as it's a sort of a violent story, right?
Right.
So that causes the customers to ask, can this company deliver on what we've agreed to working with you guys? Right?
Now you just got back from the US, and you would, I mean, I'm sure you must have met your clients at that point or whatever, and
Some customers, the US concern about this is actually far less.
I just want to ask you that.
Most US customers are like, whatever, you guys are doing your stuff, it's fine.
We've seen worse.
And we've seen worse, and also they don't know this is going on.
Right.
I have friends in the US American friends, who had no idea there was something going on in Sri Lanka.
Anyway,
Local news
CNN
isn't
and all
carried.
get very little international
Yeah,
news.
yeah.
Really not
American-
interested.
And that's on the
American,
we
not
see the
international,
CNN,
American CNN.
and we see
really.
CNN International homepage. We don't see the CNN US homepage.
That's right.
Right.
Right?
Very
You go to
little
CNN
international.
US homepage, you see it's about this mass shooting versus that mass shooting.
Yeah.
Sorry to say, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
It is what it is.
different problem, right? So
Yeah. But actually, something that you mentioned, Peter, just now, that that how dependent we are on IT, on software. Why aren't there an infinite number of homegrown solutions to these, the software that actually drains a lot of the forex in this country? I'm sure this problem would have been foreseen and also experienced for over so many years.
Now, that's why I'm happy to be with Sanjeev on
Yeah.
the show. Now, you see, they make products,
Yeah.
world class, and they challenge the status quo. They have a standard, come from IBM.
Yeah.
IBM dominated this whole middleware space and all that, but without making cosmetic changes, he said, let's completely rethink and redo this. Correct, Sanjay? Now, that's what we should do in Sri Lanka. We'll come to that later.
Yeah,
right.
In fact, I use his example once when I was interviewed. I said, this country needs a complete recharge, relook,
Yeah.
not tinkering around the edges, and we are used to this. In IT, we do it all the time. We look at a completely different solution to a set of problems that has brought us to a halt.
Yeah.
So they have done that. Now, when he was at ICTA, said, was it the national ID project that you...
the national ID is being done.
No,
okay,
something
right?
you said we will do.
The railway ticketing. one
Railway
was the one
ticket.
that got-
You remember you said,
Yeah.
he has always championed this. Two things. He said, let's use open source.
Right.
Open source means you pay nothing almost, very little, shall we say, comparative to the larger companies, the big companies like the standard companies like Microsoft, like Oracle and all of that. Open source is more easily available, less costly, and he has always said, let's develop software using it. But that's not really caught on because they're vested interests. They come in and they invest here and they create a situation where you are dependent on them. And once you buy their software, they come with all sorts of licensing. They're complete monopoly sometimes.
Right.
So he has always spoken for develop open source, and he said, let's develop some of the national projects here.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't get projects of that scale, Sanjeev,
Yeah.
you can't really make it. You can't be a big. That's where Slascom and all have fallen short.
Right.
You can't. You have to do it here. So when he was at ICTA, he said, I'll take on this project. We'll do it. They tried to make out, no, that's not the function of ICTA, but they could have made an exception.
Of course.
And he would have done it.
Yeah. Ultimately, for the
That's
benefit of the
the
country.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And
So-
then when we build, just 30
Yeah,
seconds,
go
Sanjeev, and you can come in, I'd like you to come in. When we build something that we want to develop for government tenders, they don't have any consideration. So you will never get local companies building the kind of software you need to build in country, gain that experience. Two things happen. One is you less reliance on foreign software, you build a capacity and an industry that you can talk about, then you take that global,
Yeah.
regional,
I agree.
global.
I agree.
That does not happen. Despite Slascom, all that. There's no consideration. And later I'll talk to you about how ICT is not used, even in the central bank, which can lead to some of the problems you're talking about. They're not using data.
Oh,
I'll
really?
come to I'll come to that later. Go ahead, Sanju, fill in on that, please.
So there was an essay written by this guy called Mark Andreessen. He's the one who wrote the first web browser called Mosaic, right? And he's now a venture capitalist, runs Andreessen Horowitz. In 2011, he wrote an essay called Software is Eating the World. It's a Wall Street Journal essay. It's really interesting. It's fully worth reading.
Right.
It's very easy to understand. It basically talks about 2011, right? This is 11 years ago now. Wrote a story explaining how software is taking over all aspects of life. That was the concept of eating the world, right? Then we see that in Sri Lanka everywhere now. Our network that you are streaming this on is running on software.
Of course. Yeah.
1990, you call service area.
Yeah.
They have a fantastic piece of software built locally, actually,
Right.
that runs the dispatch and the entire operation of 1990. Right? If you make a phone call, that's on software. If you use the app, everything is on software. Now,
Right.
Sri Lanka is also dependent on software.
Right.
It's really a drug. You get addicted to it, and you have no choice. So, as a country, then some degree of software independence becomes a national interest.
Right.
National
Right?
interest.
Because we have food independence. We need food independence to some level, right? We can't always say the basic food. It's fine if the wine and cheese has to be imported.
Yes, of
Right.
course.
Because we can live without it.
Yes,
Right.
right.
We can't live without the basic rice and the basic
Yeah.
The pol sambo.
Yeah.
and slightly more than that, but it is
Yeah,
slightly
okay,
more
yeah.
than that, right? If you have to import that as well, that's not a good situation. So software is in a similar position. Now it's becoming, so we need food independence, we need energy independence, we need some level of security and national defense independence. We also need software independence. So open source, the concept of open source is that there's software that people write all over the world that is made available in source form for anybody to consume.
Right.
And what that becomes is a platform that you can use to build your own software as you need.
And constructed along.
And construct it the way you want.
Right,
So,
right.
so there is some value in saying, as a country, when you're building solutions for yourself, building it on top of open source stuff gives you a little bit more leverage with regards to what you can do.
Right.
Right? So that's one aspect. Another aspect is that we in Sri Lanka have this mindset that has a hangover from colonial era, which is that foreign is better.
Yes,
Right.
of course.
Right.
Whether it is an actor or a song
Right.
or a piece of software
Right.
or a chocolate
Right.
or a car,
Anything, really.
anything,
Right.
foreign is better.
Right.
Right. Foreign horse would have been a bit better, right? But
Maybe we are stuck
we'll accept them. We have a choice. So.
Can be.
I know people who still get cheesed off if you say anything against the Queen.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
They get really
I mean,
wound up.
and we were talking earlier. People whiten.
Yeah. We use
the,
white
the
babies,
subjects
white,
in ads.
white
Right,
models,
right?
white
Right.
babies.
We use
Yeah.
white models.
Yeah.
It's utterly embarrassing that we do that.
Right.
Right. Fair and Lovely became unpopular after the
whole backlash.
Yeah.
or the backlash,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then it became. They have a new name for it.
I didn't know that.
There's a new name for it. It's not Fair and Lovely because Fair is
Of
not
course.
allowed.
None
to
of
be-
us use it. So
Yeah,
you
clearly
know.
we are not. We've been using it, but it's not working.
If we did, it has not worked on us.
Right? There's an inherent problem our companies have in paying for local companies' software at the rates we are willing to pay for foreign companies.
Of course.
Right? We are naturally, $100,000 for a piece of software when you are running a company is a normal thing.
Right.
And a large company will say, okay, you have to pay it. If a local company bids the equivalent of $100,000, you'll be like, what?
Exactly.
What?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So then you are saying, okay, so, and then also think about what our largest IT industry business model is. It is to sell people to the rest of the world for services.
Right.
Right.
So if you look at Virtusa, if you look at a lot of the companies, the non-product companies, the service
Right.
companies, right? A
Right.
lot of the STASCOM members are service companies.
Right.
They sell people one way or the other for services. So you give me the work to do, I do the work and I give it back to you, right? Perfectly fine, right? Service industry.
Right.
So there's a rate at which you sell. So it may be $200 a day to $500 a day on the high end,
Yeah.
probably is what you're selling, right? Now, so if you bid for a contract in a Sri Lankan company or a Sri Lankan government organization and you put $200 a day cost, they won't pay it. Right? It's too high. Somebody will underbid. So some other company will bid at $25 a day. Right? And then what happens in reality in life, in anything, you get what you pay for.
Yeah,
Right.
of course.
Right.
Because you are, I mean, the reality is, so if I'm a service company and I bid for his contract,
Right.
and I have another contract from you, and you're paying me $200 a day for my engineer, and he's paying me $25 a day for my engineer, where am I going to put my better engineer? Right?
Of course, yes.
So and then as a result, there's an unbelievable range of salaries in the software industry. The entry-level graduate coming from a university in Sri Lanka, or the top universities even, will range from about maybe 40,000 rupees to about 500,000 rupees plus now.
Wow.
Right?
500.
Entry level.
Entry level.
Yeah.
I remember 500.
No, because
50,000,
all the
100,000.
companies are paying in dollar
Yeah,
converter,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right.
So if you're paying $1,500 a month, that's 500,000 rupees.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? That is very common now.
Right.
Entry level, straight out of university.
Wow.
Right?
I didn't know this.
Okay.
The wrong business we're in.
It's not a program. But there are also people who are getting paid 30, 40, 50,000 rupees.
Right. There's a massive disparity.
I mean, like you don't see that in journalism,
Yeah.
in
In
other
media,
industries.
yeah.
That 10x range you don't see.
Right.
Right? So why is that happening? That's because of who you're selling to. Now we were talking about the brain drain, right? The biggest thing that's hitting is any company that is trying to build software products for Sri Lanka.
Right.
A startup that is running a business that is selling to Sri Lanka, because Sri Lankan companies don't want to pay properly. They want to pay, they say, build me a website, 25,000 rupees.
Yeah, absolutely. I encountered this on a
Okay,
regular
so
basis.
if it takes a person half a month to build a website, which takes a lot longer than that typical, it takes
Right.
half a month to pay a website. If there's a company and all, they need to make a margin. That means you can pay the guy about, what, 25,000, 30,000 rupees a month,
Exactly.
right? So that doesn't work. So we have to get out of this mindset that we need software. Sri Lanka needs software, because this digital transformation terminology that we hear
Yeah.
is about productivity improvement, is about the amount of output we can generate per person. The government needs to go digital, and so forth. And the government will happily go digital by giving a $100 million contract to somebody else.
Somebody else. So what you're trying to say, Sanjay, sorry, Anu, what you're trying to say is
Peter, you want to let somebody else.
our companies that are already set up here, that who are pretty much equipped to deliver what most probably the overseas companies can do, are shunned upon. That you are not
Shunned,
going to,
yeah.
So there are two ways it's shunned upon. One is the tenders will say, actually the tenders will have two criteria that kicks every company in Sri Lanka where it hurts.
Right.
One, it'll say, you must have been doing projects like this before.
Yeah.
So you say, okay, we need a system for driving license. Another one of those things that I tussled with. So, right, I got into a fight with them about this. 9 billion rupee system, right?
Right.
Over some number of year period, 9 billion rupees. The tender says you must have built a driving license system before.
Right.
Okay, well, which company in Sri Lanka has built a driving license system? Because we only have one system,
Yeah.
right? So everybody's immediately out. So the way it gets built is they have to partner with somebody from outside who's done a solution somewhere else. But if you're a software architect, I'm a technical guy, I'm a software architect. If you're a building architect, right? Say you're an architect. If you're going to build a house that has 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms and 3 floors, an architect who knows the concepts of architecture and the fundamentals of architecture can build that house.
Right.
Right? You don't need to ask the guy, have you built a house with 3 floors, 5 rooms and 4 bathrooms
Right.
before you can give me the contract? No. You ask the guy, does he have the fundamentals of architecture?
Yeah.
Right? So that is the mistake we make when we put that requirement. Saying, have you built this one before? Well, no.
But Sanjay, is it something that the industry needs to push a little more? Because I think a lot of people are not really aware of our capability in this sphere.
I don't think that's...
No, that's not the case. Now, the thing is this now, and to your point, Sanjay, the frightening thing is this. There are many government and private institutions that have spent millions and they have nothing to show for it.
Yes. So most projects fail. That's the other reason. We can talk about that separately. Yeah.
These are large companies who have contracted.
Yeah.
Global companies. I don't want to mention names.
Yeah.
The biggest. They're all interested in is your license. That's all they care. They take the money. That's why they contract you. They subcontract the work to others and they take no responsibility
Yeah.
to make the system run the way you intended it to run.
Right.
You cannot charge them for it. It's all in the fine print.
that's a colossal amount of money that's going out of the country.
I can't give you names, but there are large government institutions that have paid this one company for a certain type of system. If I tell too many things, they know who they are. Yeah. And they have nothing to show for. And they got awards. That global company gives them awards, take their people abroad, photographs.
Of course.
You go now and ask those guys. Customer relationship management software. There's nothing to show for it, man. This is the sad thing. And it's happening everywhere. Now you saw the big scandals, State Pharmaceutical Corporation. You were not here, Sanjeev.
I saw that.
But you saw that. You
I was here
online.
when that happened.
Let's not go into that. But that's the point. So you spend the money and you don't have anything that really works.
Right.
Shocking.
So, I mean, the IT industry per se, I mean, how has it grown? Has it grown according to the capabilities of the country, or has it just because IT industry is so hip to get into, has it actually exponentially grown? Is that something also that we need to consider?
Is there some control?
Consumption or production?
Production per se.
You have some numbers, but I see, again, I'll take Slascom. It's a shifting number all the time. You know, when we started years ago, I was supposed to moderate the session. They said, Peter, we must go out there and say software is going to be the largest export of Sri Lanka in 5 years. Yeah. And I said, hold it, guys. We're talking about garments at that time was 3 billion, Sanjeeva. And they said, we are now...
Software would have been 200 million at the time.
That's what they said. Then I went around the room. I said, okay, let's start looking at the numbers. Sri Lankan company. I said, I was at Millennium IT. Yeah. I said, our earnings are $6 million. They said, what? I said, yes, let's go around the room. And they went around. Virtus has said, we are 40 million, whatever, but we can attribute so percentage because they are not a local company. Or Machan, we couldn't add up 100 million. Now you are trying to grow to 3 billion. Now,
from what you were
sad to say, Slascom keep shifting this number. When we don't make it, they don't relook, reposition and say, okay, let's do something achievable. Right. Now, the Slascom number must be something like $5 billion.
It is 5 billion.
Actually,
no, recently reduced to 3 billion by 2025, which is not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
It's impossible.
1 billion. Now comes our next technology minister who is going to take office.
Right.
I tell you, I saw his proposal. Yeah. We can increase software to 5 billion. How? I will have 50,000 more graduates coming out in the next 1 year. If you can scale like that, then it's a joke. No?
If you can scale like that, India would have scaled 10 times that by now.
Actually,
absolutely, they're right next to us.
And these are the people they're bringing now to save this country. I mean, it's rubbish that you can scale a business because we can have 50,000 graduates being produced like magic. And they'll all come out and they'll all be working and they'll all get money. So, simple equation. And everybody, Lord, Savior. It's not going to happen.
Sanjeev, on the subject of speaking about India, in terms of, I mean, obviously everyone knows what a massive IT hub India has turned out to be. What are they doing right that we are not? Are they also more focused on national policies that we were talking about right now?
So India has done a bunch of things really right. So first of all, for the first 20 years, so India's starting point for IT was the Y2K problem. You guys are too young to know what the Y2K problem is.
No,
you're not too young.
But
we have similar hairstyles, so maybe we are.
Let me take that as a compliment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you
So
very
Y2K
much.
problem for the young audience was when we turned from 1999 to 2000. Everybody is, oh my God, all this software which saves years in 2 digits is going to fall apart that night.
Right.
And so every piece of software ever written was being checked to see whether this would fall apart. Right. So now you needed thousands and thousands of people. That is what opened up the Indian outsourcing industry.
Okay.
Right. Y2K problem is what created the need for very large volumes of people.
Right.
And then it turned out Y2K was a bust.
Yeah.
Right. So IBM, for example, at the time, I was in IBM at the time. IBM had an entire team of people that night at midnight at every time zone ready to go in case something went wrong, because banks would collapse was the expectation.
Staring at the screens.
Right? And these guys all, and there was one call they got in the middle of the night saying something went wrong, it's not working.
Right.
And everybody said, oh yes, something to do now, finally. Right? All excited. Then it turns out that those guys hadn't upgraded their license. This is a true story, right? And so they called the guy up and said, "Hey, buddy, you didn't pay. We have a better sleep. Tough shit for you." Right? So that's but India then took off from there, and also at the same time, the luck for India was that e-commerce, the web, the internet was taking off. 1999 was 2001 was the blow up of the first .com era.
Right.
And then came sort of the mature .com business, basically digital business was coming along. India was well set. We had a lot of people trained in infrastructure, so they took off on that. So they were a services country for a very long time. In fact, there was Narayana Murthy, who was the founder of Infosys, was in Sri Lanka and gave a talk, and I was in the audience.
I remember your question.
2006 or so.
Probably.
Right? Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, Sun Microsystems, which nobody knows about now, was up for sale. Sun had been $200 billion value during the peak of the .com era. They were up for sale for $6 billion. Sun was the owner of Java. Java is a programming language. Anybody who knows software knows, right?
Nice
and a bunch of other stuff. So I asked him, saying, why don't you guys buy Sun? Right? And his answer in 2000, in that 5-6 range, I can't remember,
right,
was, we don't want to buy Sun because we are eating the crumbs off them, basically. Right? Because they're selling services.
Right.
They make a 30% profit margin on service. They were perfectly happy. That was the mindset of the Indian IT industry at that time.
Right.
Sanjeev, you also asked Narayana Murthy, why aren't you a product company?
Yeah.
I still remember that. They had not really built their Finacle banking
That's
software.
right. That came a bit later.
I still remember
right?
that.
Because
he said, India is not a product company.
So
it's all services.
It's very simple. Virtus, a fantastic success story out of Sri Lanka. They sold to a PE recently for $2 billion. Their revenue was $1.5 billion at the time. Right? So they sold for less than 1.5x, right? Yeah. In the software industry, when a company is doing well, a company that has a revenue of 50 million, MySQL, which is a database, open source database, revenue of less than 50 million sold for $1 billion, right? Multiple of 20 times.
Wow.
Right? So a good software company can sell for anywhere between 10 to 50 times revenue when they go public. Right? The company called Confluent went public recently. Revenue of 250 million, market cap $11 billion.
Ooh, wow.
Right? So that is the value of product. Now coming back to India, what has happened since then in India? India has a market that is so large that the middle income group in India is larger than the entire population in the US.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So the software opportunity in India is so tremendous that India has an amazing amount of software companies now. Focus on the India market.
Correct.
And India VC investment going into India, every major VC has operations in India, right? And they're investing in India because there's so much opportunity. And then they're taking it outward, right? So there's a company called Postman, which was in MySpace. It's an API testing company, right? Started out of India. It's now based in the US. The founders and everybody moved out to the US. And the company is worth billions of dollars, right?
Wow.
And started out of India by 2 people. So this kind of product success in India is now just mushrooming out. India still hasn't had many world-leading, like TikTok is the first sort of breakout from China.
Right.
Right, as a software product
Right.
that everybody in the world is using.
Right.
India has a bunch like that. There's a whole bunch of products that we're using that we don't even know they're from India.
Right.
Right, they originated out of India.
Right.
But that's going to keep on going. So they have an advantage we don't have. A market that is sizable.
Right.
Right. So we have to accept that, and you cannot change that because we don't have enough people here.
And they trust
the
their
answer,
own product,
they have more of that than we
Now
have.
then
Definitely.
when you ask that question,
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
I'll tell you another interesting story, Sanjeev. I worked for Sun.
Yeah.
So then India also, another secret for India's success is they drew out IBM. Because there was a time when they were looking at internally developing aircraft, cars, and they told all foreign companies, you are working in India, you should use JV.
Yeah.
Right.
So IBM said, we are not interested, threw them out. Now, they didn't have the mainframe software, operating system,
Right.
and the mid-range, which Sri Lanka dominated by IBM system, AS400, System 36 and all that. What did they do? They turned to Unix. They were forced to. That's how they became a Unix country,
Right.
which is more open,
Right.
not proprietary. Sri Lanka, when we brought Sun to Sri Lanka, we offered them a Java training center for free. There was only one in Malaysia, in the region. I was working for a local partner and also later with Sun, free of charge. They didn't take it. Why? Our IT industry was dominated by IBM. And every one of the top, I don't want to mention names, man, senior people, some of whom have died, highly respectful. They were all for System 36, COBOL, RPG2. At our NIBM, we offered them. If we took it, this was 1991, we'd had Java. Java was really coming up.
Yeah.
They were so entrenched with IBM. They said no. NIBM, I spoke to Dr. Jayasinghe and I said, take this. Habada Puta, skinny fellow he was. Habada Puta. That's how he said. He smiled and he said, no. COBOL, RPG2, old programming language, that's the future. And we're offering them Java, when they're just coming up. We would have been a different country now. We missed the bus.
We seem to be missing the bus all the time.
Now it's not missing the bus.
Now there's
There's a flat tire.
You're
pushing the bus.
Pushing the bus. No, but
Anyway.
So, but just one more thing about India,
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand one of the key successes of India is the government digitization.
right.
So they have had, they started this project called Aadhaar, started pre-Modi.
Right.
Aadhaar is basically a biometric ID.
Right.
Right. It's controversial because
Yeah, that's a
biometric,
controversial.
The
there's
whole
the-
Aadhaar card situation.
Yeah, it's a-
because it's a unique number that identifies you. Whenever there's a unique number that identifies you, it's dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
Because somebody can put it all together and say, oh, you have this, all that, right? So
Right.
there is a other side to that, right? And also India didn't have even birth certificates for the most part. Sri Lanka is not in that position. We have 99.9% birth certificate coverage. Almost everybody has an NIC,
Right.
and so on, right? So we're in a different
Correct.
situation there. But Aadhaar loved them. So when Modi, Prime Minister Modi took over, they were first going to kill it. Actually, Aadhaar has been done very interesting way. It has been done by another Nandan Nilekani, who was the other co-founder of Infosys. They have a volunteer group that did this project, right? Built the software for it. And then anyway, the government decided, okay, yes, we are going to go ahead with it. They created something called Unique Identity Authority of India. And they have a digital ID, they have a biometric ID, a number basically for you. That's the digital part of it, it's the digits, right?
Yeah.
There's a number for each person. Then they have gone on to build something called UPI, Universal Payment Interface. So WhatsApp Pay is one of the largest payment platforms now because
Right.
UPI is a standard protocol for paying anybody.
Right.
They have an entire stack like this called India Stack. The most recent one is open commerce platform that allows the petty of the world to participate in e-commerce,
Right.
in digital commerce.
Right.
Because India is very worried about Walmart and Flipkart, Amazon and Walmart
Right.
taking the retail market.
Right.
They don't want that to happen because India is it's an independent issue.
That's right.
Basically, right?
Yeah.
So they are enabling everybody to play. So the government is doing the right thing on the IT side there by being the platform for the country to build on, not trying to build everything.
Right.
That is another mistake we make in Sri Lanka.
Right. I get
We
it.
don't, it's like the SOEs. Why do we have government doing business of this?
Right.
Instead of being the regulator and being the platform and saying private
Yeah, we
industry
will
can do
enable
that.
you
So
to do this.
we enable you to do this, we regulate you. There are boundaries you must play
Of
within,
course.
but
But we are not building.
we are not
We're
building
not
it all.
building, we're letting you build. So that's pretty much basically
Yeah. Actually, just to backtrack a little bit, why is it that there are so few women in this business?
So it's a global thing.
Okay.
Globally in engineering overall is about 15%
Right.
female, right?
Even Google is very few.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Very
a
low.
global. So WSO has about 30%. So we're doing a
Wow.
bit better than
That's
most
great.
companies,
Almost
right?
double.
Yeah, but it starts off going all the way back to school. In schools, teachers tell young girls,
Yeah.
why do you want to do science?
Absolutely.
There's a mind. So it's a deep problem that must start off at the school level
Yeah.
to say anybody can do any of this stuff. There is nothing special about it, and kind of move it forward from there. And it's going to take a long time to get to any kind of parity
Yeah.
in the engineering areas. Computer science is no different. And also there's the perception of long work hours, all kinds of things that sometimes are real.
Yeah.
But so there are many aspects involved.
And also a lot of prejudice at work.
Of course.
Absolutely.
In the US, even the technology among the academia and all that, they've done studies
Yeah.
Yeah.
where you change the name, you make Jane John.
Yeah.
and you get the job.
Yeah,
It's been a woman.
Yeah, actually, there's a very interesting story.
Yeah.
So like now, WSO2 or in Sri Lankan companies, we don't pay differently based on whether you're male or female.
Of course.
Right? Salesforce, everybody knows Salesforce, right?
Yes.
Until 5 years ago, when the whole Me Too movement started, until then, they were paying different salaries. And there's a video of the Salesforce CEO getting upset. We are now unified, everybody's getting paid the same. Right? That concept never even occurred to any of us saying, oh, she, let's pay her less. That concept of you're an engineer, that's it. Doesn't matter what you are.
We asked for parity for plantation workers during my training days.
So
20 years ago.
These top US companies were paying differently until recently.
Until it obviously blew up in the last couple of years.
That's right. Until it blew up and said, you can't get away with this anymore.
Exactly.
Right? Actually, there were Sri Lankan companies doing the same thing as well.
Wow.
I won't name the company. But
Let's talk about the industry now. Let's talk about the current situation now. Obviously, like Anu said earlier on, it's one of the key industries that is still, bringing in the dollars into this country. And yesterday we had Sarinder on the show yesterday, and of course the apparel industry is it's another industry that's bringing in. But everybody's mitigating issues, so to say. How is the industry going to take this on? I mean, we have so many things that actually affecting the industry. Drain is one, right? The constant power cuts is another one that we're having.
Add a little element to that, Shaq, because why we ask that is because it is now fairly obvious that nobody is really counting on the government to come up with a solution.
Exactly.
So you got to come up with your own. So
where? How is the industry taking this on? I know there are many challenges, but we are all not in a situation where you can just close shop and go.
Okay, Sanjay will have a different take because there's a very specific question.
Right.
But I will give you a slightly different answer.
Right.
Now, this thing about digital, the big problem is, including our private sector, they are not really interested in the potential of digital because they don't have a digital mindset. Digital is not technology, correct, Sanjay? It's a mindset about the possibility, new possibilities. Now, it works at government also, and I'll tell you that's why we are having this problem. Not looking at data. Now, we gave a government sector, and I mentioned the name MAS, a predictive analytics model about 10 years ago, almost 8 years ago. 3 years since I left Enable, so maybe 8 years ago, where we could predict who are the people who will leave in the next 3 months.
Right. Wow.
47 names we gave, 43 left.
Wow.
Yes. Now, they did nothing with it. They couldn't see, my God, if you can do this,
Absolutely, the
project
possibilities.
ended. Now, we took it to a couple of banks. Banks have 5-6 million customers. Their credit card is only about 250,000 credit card base.
Right.
Now, they outsource it to a company, cold calls you. Sometimes at night in a language you don't understand. You already have a card that has not been updated. You remember his mother also and scold him. And we gave them this model and said we can, with a 76% accuracy, tell you who are the most likely people to go for a credit card over the next 3 months.
Yeah.
No takers.
Wow, really?
They took it, they give it to IT. Now the CEO is not interested. Why? Because banks are making super profits.
Yeah.
Throughout this crisis, they have doubled and tripled their profits because they work on massive spread.
Right.
Now I went to a bank recently, I got a shock, Sanjeev. Savings account, I had forgotten about it. They're offering 2.5%. It's predatory. That's a different topic. We'll have a different discussion. Predatory habits of banks in Sri Lanka. Now, digital. Uninterested. Because they are making, what is the digital experience banks give us today? Now, we took this to the central bank and said open banking. Our friend and your colleague, work colleague, led this initiative.
Yeah,
Seshika, fantastic person, training there. Very. She led it. We are the first committee to actually do a report. Gave it to the central bank. And I told them, the first day we went, he said we have the director payments. He said we have 13 initiatives around this. I said, I hope this is not the 14th. That doesn't see the light of day. It's still stuck there. Now, the central bank is in the middle of this controversy that we are facing today.
Right.
What is the data they use? Sanjeev, primitive. Data at central bank. Primitive. Still Excel spreadsheets, paper. Now, this is the institution that's going to provide data to make vital decisions.
Correct.
So this is the state of digital in this country. Private sector is bad. Till recently, some of the big companies, conglomerates, you go to their counter to buy a loaf of bread or something, get telephone number and in front of everybody you tell your phone number.
Yeah.
Others are listening to your phone number. Why should they? I mean, tap and go.
Yeah,
And these are companies that claim to be, you see, they are primitive.
Yeah, true.
So government, Shaq, now the tax cut. They gave a tax cut that caused one of the things that led to this. Now they revised the tax cut. What data did they use? What data did
I
they
think
use?
they guessed.
To see whether it should be 20% of a higher slabs more?
Flip a coin.
Just, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So this is the problem.
So I also believe that if there is a sudden surge of interest in the information and communication technologies purely because of the pandemic, because the companies that refuse to move ahead with digitalization of their companies, they were forced to do it because of the pandemic.
Not the kind of digital that I'm thinking of, but I'll let Sanjeev answer, then I'll
Right.
come back to that.
Yeah, so certainly there's a McKinsey study that says 7 years of digital transformation happened in 1 year because of the pandemic.
Right.
I think even in Sri Lanka, I mean, we see lots of new businesses that came on selling through Instagram to WhatsApp to,
That kind.
So sort of the basic digitization of digitally operating a business took off.
Right.
Because there was no choice.
Right.
You want to keep your restaurant going, you find some way to get an online order.
Right.
Everybody signed up to Uber Eats, to pick me food, to whatever, to get the food out, So I think that kind of stuff, definitely we've crossed a chasm on that.
But what about the big companies, the companies that were actually run by, the CEOs and the chairmen who are in their 60s and 70s, who didn't believe in it, were forced to actually take it on at that point?
Yes. So I think this is a boardroom challenge.
Right.
So I am slightly conflicted because I'm on the board of Sampat Bank, so I have to be a bit careful what I say about banks and central bank, right? But it is I think a lot of boardrooms still don't have sort of IT business people on the boards.
Right.
So the mindset about I think Peter's exactly right. The mindset about IT is that it's a cost center, not an opportunity center. What it means to be digital is to run the business with digital as an enabler, as a foundation for doing business. Not like, okay, I need some email. Okay, fine, we pay Microsoft or pay Google or pay somebody to get that service, right? I need a CRM, so pay somebody to buy a CRM. I need a this, I need a that, so we buy that. And we are good. That is the cost center part of IT. Then there's the innovation part of IT, enabling the business to innovate. That thinking is far and
beyond reach.
Far and beyond
The
reach.
CEOs are subcontracting it. The CEOs are not taking the trouble to sit
The
down.
business owners have to take it in order for it to really go.
And they can have good conversations.
It doesn't work because the IT guys actually, many organizations, IT guys have good ideas, but they can't convince the business owners.
Right.
So it's a two-way
But
problem.
also now, Sanjeev, I see IT banks, they're struggling to find good CIOs.
And they are.
With mindset.
And
see, to Sanjeev's point, digital means much of changing business at the front end, at the touch points.
So isn't some
None of the banks
doing a wonderful job about it?
Sampat Bank is wonderful.
Well, I see Sanjeev is there. I can't. It's not
No, but
fair.
I really mean
No.
It's not fair.
No, honestly, no. I don't think any bank is going. I mean, what Peter said about the savings account being 3%, right? I'm a Sampat Bank customer as well. I have experienced that.
Right.
Which is pretty ridiculous, right?
Right.
I mean, it's data driven. It shouldn't be done like that. They don't need to do that.
And if they push the open banking framework, other little companies can jump in and disrupt.
Right.
Yeah.
So the banks control the central bank. I'm telling you this with responsibility. Today our banks control the central bank. I'm telling you. Let some central banker challenge me on this.
Oh,
So regular.
They won't do anything without calling them, asking them, shall we do this? No, they should.
It should be the other way around.
Supervision should be cramped. At a time like this, they can't allow predatory practice. But leave predatory. About open banking, we did the work. Because if they do it, it disrupts bank. Like Paytm in India, which was a telephone reload company. They are a big bank. Only they can't lend. But they can pay interest on the money that's
in your card.
in your phone.
In your phone, sorry.
And they can do chai wala. You can pay
Yeah.
with your
Correct. Yeah.
ATM.
And it's really taken off in India.
Because they
Everybody
allowed
kind of-
open banking.
Yeah.
So
In
they
fact,
took on State Bank of India.
No, just to retrace our steps a little bit.
We don't have
This-
that kind of revolution in banking.
True.
No.
When you said that open source was the way forward, is there a problem with like owning that code? Like if you do use it, is it proprietary to you, or is it still out there?
So, what matters now is not whether you own the code. So you use Google Apps probably for some stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You have an iPhone or an Android phone, right? Do you know what the source code is written in? Do you know? You don't care. It's the experience that you appreciate,
Right.
right? So customers, you said about banks experience, whether you're a Combank or Sampath Bank, HNB Bank, People's Bank, BOC, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What the customer wants is a great digital experience, right? They don't know whether the source code is there or not. And it's also competitive differentiation. If I'm going to compete against his bank, right, and we are two different banks, we are competing,
Right.
if we offer the same digital experience, there is no differentiation there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there is a certain degree of ownership of the experience that matters. Whether that involves ownership of the source code or not is a second tier conversation.
Okay.
What matters is the ownership of the experience I deliver to customers, right?
Okay.
And so the getting digitization going in Sri Lanka to that level, it comes back to that other problem that we were talking about at the beginning, which is, are you willing to pay for it? Right? Now, banks have a major problem right now keeping IT staff, because the software companies that are export oriented have pegged their salaries to dollars for the most part, and the bank IT cannot do that.
So I mean, sorry to disturb you. Just interject there, Sanjeev. The issue with IT departments in corporates and companies, they're pretty much there only for maintenance, aren't they?
So exactly, it's a cost center.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are there to keep the lights on.
Exactly.
They keep, project is not for call IT.
Oh,
Exactly.
right.
I hate the word IT.
Yes,
Right? So
yes.
I'm on a campaign to rename digital engineering.
Absolutely.
The business should have a digital engineering team.
Yeah,
Right.
actually, that was going to be my
Not
next
an IT
question.
team.
Because all the IT people that we have encountered, they made it sound like Greek for one thing. They just operated in the periphery of the company. Wire
So you need that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you do need that infrastructure. You
Yes.
need the networking. Nothing works if you don't have the wires.
Yeah,
the
but that
fiber.
has become the focal point, which shouldn't
Exactly,
do.
which is not where the consumer, you as a
Right.
consumer,
Yeah.
have experienced digital.
Right.
You don't know whether there's a wire or a fiber or a
Yeah.
DSL cable. Who cares?
Right.
Not your problem, right?
It's ridiculous. I mean, there's so much that obviously that we can. I mean, the reason that we actually brought about India is the fact that it's so very close to us. I mean, we almost share pretty much the same culture and so on and so forth. But they are so far ahead in terms of digitalization, purely because the fact that the government is, pretty much open.
There's one big difference between India and Sri Lanka. It's not only because they're open. They have an administrative system that hasn't been corrupted for 30 years, 40 years.
Right.
Ours started in 1978 when we removed the permanent secretary concept and said, I'll appoint whoever I want as secretary to a ministry.
Yeah.
Right?
And they appoint people from the private sector.
Absolutely.
Random
this-
person from the private sector who doesn't know government procurement protocols becomes a secretary to a ministry.
Absolutely.
You can't.
And now we do
It's
have the title
complicated.
of permanent secretary, but
No,
they are
we
not
don't.
permanent.
We don't. We don't have permanent secretary. It's secretary.
Yeah.
Right?
That
We removed the
institution.
concept of permanent. That was the beginning of the end of the administrative service in Sri Lanka. And then, of course, the sort of neoliberal way of bringing in capitalism that brought corruption from the bottom up as well. Can you do anything without paying the PN off?
That's
right?
true.
So there's bottom end corruption. There's a top end corruption. So we blame the politicians, but it's not only the politicians.
Certainly not.
Entire system in Sri Lanka is corrupted.
And we're looking at system change. You're talking
We are
about
looking for system change, but we are looking at system changes, and we are saying we want system change, but it's the other guy, not me.
Yeah.
Right,
Correct,
right.
correct.
There's a lot more that we obviously want to talk about. There's so many questions that have been also coming in, which we are going to get into. But right about now, it's about time for us to sort of, wrap up things. And but before we go, we have the poll that we actually set out earlier on. We're going to quickly run into that one and see what the answer is. It'll be very interesting to figure out with the two stalwarts of the industry. And
Correct. So the poll was very simple. A yes or no answer to this question. Can the ICT industry survive the brain drain in Sri Lanka? And you had to WhatsApp your answer to our hotline 077 669 1590.
So before we actually do give the answer, Let me just ask Peter, what do you think? As far as the question is, can the ICT industry survive the brain drain in Sri Lanka?
Sanjay already answered.
Yes.
He said survive, yes.
Yes.
Thrive, not so sure.
Yeah. So well, let's find out what the
people think.
What the people think.
Oh, very close.
Can survive.
Yeah,
Just their
50-50
margin.
almost.
50-50 almost. I mean, yeah, 53%.
that's
Yes, the
important.
ICT
That's
industry
very,
can survive.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wisdom
So that
of the
kind of
crowd, they say.
perception,
Wisdom.
is what we need to change, I believe. When because I think like we were talking to certain government entities, former government entities, present government entities, that their communication is a lot lacking. Where right now you see that there's a lot more communication going on with the people than ever before.
But still not the way, like, I mean, we were saying at the
Certainly,
beginning.
yeah, but it's a start,
The Prime
I feel.
Minister starts off by making you feel depressed in the morning.
Absolutely.
Right? Imagine working in a company
Yeah,
where the
that's,
CEO every
comes
morning
up,
comes and says,
that's
"Oh, this company is screwed."
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
We are
pretty much
finished.
screwed.
You're going to get up and like say, "Oh yeah, let's go change on the world."
Yeah.
That's why the brain
Exactly.
drain is happening. It's not only because of we are staying in lines. It's because we are made depressed about our future.
Yeah.
Sri Lanka is a fantastic country.
Of course.
We have so much opportunity. We have screwed it up for a while now, but we can fix it. This is not a problem.
But what does it take? Because you see, they brought it to bankruptcy means bankruptcy.
Yeah.
There's no money. See, we have to pay a massive debt. And I saw just a bulletin running in your
Yeah. Yeah.
this thing there. Said
Yeah.
nobody's going to give us loans for fuel. So we have to pay a debt.
Yeah.
And we have to get money to run the company, run the country.
Correct.
So bankruptcy means just that.
Absolutely.
What
You
see
can't-
on
yeah,
the
you can't
streets.
sugarcoat this,
You know, I met a guy today, an artist. His father started a tuna business. Gone. We have the finest tuna.
Wow.
He can't compete on price. No diesel to bring the fish.
Of
No
course.
wrapping material
Yeah.
that he can't import. So he's losing out. He said, in Europe, we are #1 exporter of tuna, high quality. They're losing out to Maldives and other countries. That's what bankruptcy looks like.
Yeah.
That's what we're facing. And our Prime Minister saying now I find that we are facing a worse situation than what was he thinking? It was bankrupt. So
Right.
it's a tough place to be. But to his point, you need a leader who can inspire you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to
Reflects the
inspire
will
the
of the
people.
people.
We all know, we are all
Will
aware
of the
about the doom
people.
and gloom,
Yeah.
Not someone with one seat in parliament. Inspire anybody. So that's what you're facing. Good point, son.
All right.
Inspire some.
Thank you very much,
On that
ladies
note.
and gentlemen, for being a part of the show. And we've got so much that we obviously wanted to get into. Unfortunately, we just have 1 hour to do this, which we really couldn't get into too many of these questions. But Peter, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Sanjeeva, thank you so much. Learned a lot.
Yeah, thank
of
you.
The industry.
In fact, thank you for infusing a lot more hope into us at this point.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow night, we have another very special guest on the show night at 9 o'clock till we actually speak to you then. Have yourself a wonderful night.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.